Hi, before we talk about programming, I want to talk about debugging because this is a skill that everybody should have. Programming errors are called bugs, and the process of tracking down and correct them is called debugging. There are three types of errors. Syntax errors, for example, use of wrong structure or rules in the program. For example, misspelled variable name. Runtime errors, they are the errors that occur when you run the program. For example, divided number by zero. Semantic error or logic errors. Their program does not do what it intended to do. The program runs but doesn't give you the right answer. For example, you forget to divide by 100 when converted percentage to decimal. Debugging is like detective work. You are confronted with clues, and you have to infer the processes and events that led to the result you see. So once you have some idea what is going wrong, you modify the program and try again. So as you can see, programming and debugging are basically the same thing. Programming is a process of gradually debugging a program until it does what you want. The idea is that you should start with a program that does something and make small modification, debug them, and as you go, so that you always have a working program. This is called incremental development. We talked about this back in COM 101. The goal of an incremental development is to avoid long debugging sessions by adding and testing only small amount of code at a time. You start with a working skeleton program and make small incremental changes. For example, write 2 or 3 lines of code and test that. At any point, if there is an error, you know exactly where it is. It will make the problem much easier to track down. Um, we also can use temporary variables to hold intermediate value so that you can easily inspect and check them. This is kind of like what we call scaffolding. Once the program is working, you might want to consolidate multiple statements into compound expression, but only do so if it does not make the program more difficult to read. This is kind of like what we call refactoring. Debugging is one of the most important skills you will need um, to be successful in this class. How? Use incremental development. Start small, get something small working, and then add more code. Also, read and understand the errors messages. Your program will not run the very first time. So you need to understand when the compiler or interpreter tell you what is wrong. Syntax errors such as misspelled variable name, semantic errors such as using assignment equal instead of equality equal to compare number, runtime error such as divided by zero error. And finally, you have to understand how the program should work in order to test it. For example, given the input, what is the expected output? And what is your program actual output? If the program is working, your actual output should match the expected output. If it doesn't, then the test fails. So using the input and output, you can generate the test cases. You can check your results to see whether the expected output is same as the actual output. Is same as the actual output. If test fail, debug the program and continue the process until all the tests pass. Programming is all about precision. Programs must be created precisely to run correctly. The equal, the assignment equal, and the equality equal have different meaning. Using I where J for man can yield a hard to find bug. not considering the n could be 0 in sum divided by n can cause a program to fail entirely. And counting from 0 to I less than 10 versus I less than or equal to 10 can mean the difference between a correct output and a program outputting garbage. And those are errors maybe sometimes work, sometimes doesn't. So in programming, every little detail counts. Programmers must get a mindset of paying extreme attention to detail. And this all goes with the debugging.